Welcome back, listeners, to the Mindful Living podcast, where we dive deep into the tools, practices, and stories that help us live more intentionally, compassionately, and fully. I'm your host, Sana, as always, and today we are about to embark on a journey that bridges science, soul, and self. Our guest today is someone who truly lives and breathes the essence of mindful living. Ellen Slater is a therapist, yoga instructor, mindfulness teacher, and founder of Head and Heart, a transformative program that unites ancient wisdom and modern evidence-based practices. Now, Ellen's 20 plus years of experience span hospitals, mental health clinics, and even the criminal justice system. She is a pioneer in breaking down barriers between mind and body, head and heart, and helping people heal at the deepest levels. Ellen's approach is storytelling meets science, heart meets healing. Sounds beautiful, right? So, if you are ready to explore self compassion and self acceptance as tools for change, maybe even challenge your perspectives and even go to deeper, unfathomable levels of how mindfulness can be the greatest tools for personal development, personal growth, and healing, Ellen has some gems to share with all of us, and you won't want to miss that. So, with that, Ellen, welcome to the show, and it's an absolute honor having you with us today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Sana. It's a pleasure to be here across the globe. I understand we're very far from one another.
Yeah.
In India to a small little mountain town in Washington in the United States.
Yeah. I think that's the power of technology. I think technology put in good use, instead of all the negativity surrounding it.
I
Um,
agree.
Ellen, your work, it integrates something as practical, as logical as science, mindfulness, and then storytelling. So how do self-compassion and self-acceptance form the foundation of personal transformation?
Mm, beautiful. Well, even in your question, you state the truth, which is that self-compassion and self-acceptance are the foundation for transformation. And the reason I've wound my way there, because I certainly didn't just arrive in adulthood with those things. We get a bit conditioned out of that deep self-love or self-acceptance or that sense of just being with wonder in the world. I have 2 small children, and they still have that. My eldest is just beginning to start to do his hair and kind of want to look a particular way, which is really sweet as he's kind of forming his identity in the world. So it's natural for us to kind of become aware of what the outer world thinks and believes about us. Yet we can really stray from that sense of I am enough just as I am. Like we shift from being externally driven to become rather than an internal becoming. Like, who am I? What shape am I taking? How will this soul and this spirit bloom in the world like a flower? It becomes much more externalized than internalized. And so the reason the bedrock of healing and health is that sense of self-acceptance and self-compassion is because we can't be mindful or call it aware. We can't be aware of the present moment if it isn't held in kindness. Because if we're aware of the present moment and very quickly we're trying to change it, we're judging it, we're disliking it, we've lost contact with it. I define mindfulness as seeing through the eyes of love. We want to become aware of what is arising in the present moment with love and compassion, even if we don't like it. And that's where it gets real tricky. But that's the essence. We cannot stay present if any echo of judgment arises. It removes us from being in the present moment and gets us caught in quite a cascade of neurochemicals and thoughts and agitation.
Wow, wow, that is really profound, Ellen. Uh, so, of course, what was, if you can tell us a bit about your personal journey, what brought you to the world of mindfulness, to the world of yoga? What led you to found Head and Heart?
Yeah, well, certainly, as you're suggesting, self-compassion was a path for me. I really struggled with judgment and self-criticism.
Mhm.
And I was I've always been very driven. I have been an athlete my whole life, played at very high collegiate levels, which almost made it like a full-time job being an athlete. And
Mhm.
so the discipline required, right? And the attending practices and in America, going to college does include some freedom and some playing. And for most of those hours, I was at practice. And in my later years was a paid athlete. So all of that to say, I was baffled by my inability to change, truly change in a sustainable way my thoughts. Because I was driven and I was like, I will have compassion. I will have kindness. I will not judge. But my willfulness began to paradoxically be my actual, like my cripple. It crippled me. That sort of, Carl Jung has a beautiful line, what you resist persists. The more that we push against, the harder and tighter we become, right? And so that devotion to health became actually a barrier to health. And I had to really dive into mindfulness and spiritual practices to understand, just like a river, we have to surrender and we have to allow. And that comes down to even a muscular level. I'm still unwinding my shoulders. I don't know if any listeners can hear. Maybe you consider where your shoulders are as you listen. Let them soften down your back. It's amazing how much we kind of over effort.
That's true. That's true. Wonderful, wonderful, Ellen. Also, you have studied mindfulness in indigenous cultures and veterans administration. What role does mindfulness play in cultivating self compassion, especially for people healing from trauma?
Hmm. Yeah, well, the experience of trauma really lands and originates in the body. And so there can be a lot of avoidance or numbing or shame that can come from traumatic experiences, and we don't really even know why. Sometimes it's just it lives in the body, it lives in the certain nervous system, and it communicates up into our life. It echoes out into our life, whether that be through addiction. I was at the addictions treatment center at the Seattle VA, is what you're referring to, and that was with military veterans, and the women's trauma clinic there. I also worked at Sound Mental Health with people going in and out of prison. And so addiction, numbing, uh, deeply self-critical thoughts, these are all consequences of trauma. And so due to time, I can't sort of unwrap the entire definition of trauma, but that particular consequence requires reconnecting with the heart, like deeply, deeply coming into contact with the heart brain. The heart is its own brain. It has its own nervous system. And as we wake up the heart and the echoes of the heart move through the body, we're able to hold with kindness and tenderness the experiences we've had. And we might have to do that in therapy with some guided meditations that guide you into those experiences and memories. And or you can, do that on your own or through audios. But there is a way in which we can take the awareness that you talk about in this podcast all the time, I'm sure. We can take the awareness and direct it through the heart, waking up the heart, and then allow it to heal certain experiences we have with deep, deep kindness and love. Like we're being held in they oftentimes in attachment theory, we call it sort of a nurturing presence.
Yeah.
I think of my little one when he's scared. It isn't the absence of fear that I'm ever looking for. It's actually holding and accompanying him in his fear. We're surrendering the agenda of anything being different or going away. That's mindfulness. And we're just being with it. And we want to be with it as best we can from the heart brain.
And this is something new, even our heart has a brain, although biologically we all know there is a huge, big CNS, the nervous system going through, but even heart has a brain. I think that's something new, and I think that's a very, very important takeaway our listeners can take from this conversation. So, Ellen, for people who struggle with self-critical thoughts, as you mentioned, suffering from deep ingrained trauma, where do they even begin to practice self-compassion, without it feeling forced or just thrown down upon them?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great question. That piece about being forced. I ran into that. I found it to be very cheesy and uncomfortable to sort of use affirmations that I wasn't ready for, sort of for listeners, you might, may I accept myself as I am, or may I love myself, or may I believe I'm worthy. Those things might not land yet. And so your question is important. Kristen Neff is a U.S. psychologist and researcher, and she really discovered and was able to extract from her data that in order for self-compassion to be effective, and by effective I mean for one's life to increasingly be filled with ease and have some flow to it, which I believe this podcast is hoping for their audience to learn. So in order for that to happen, we have to believe it. And so in my training and all my years of experience, what I've discovered is that it's what I call scaffolding the heart. And so what I mean by that, a scaffold, if you think about it on a building, helps you sort of slowly rise up. It brings the earth up to you. We want to bring the compassion to where we are. And so we might not be ready for, I am worthy. I am enough. Taking a big breath if you're listening and you're sort of cringing, or if that does feel good to you, please relish that and say that to yourself over and over again. That's beautiful. What that would indicate is that you're more in contact with your worthiness. So then I'm going to scaffold out. It might sound like, may I trust I am worthy. So you've sort of taken it one degree. You've taken it from I am worthy to may I trust I am worthy. And if that's a little bit too intense or that doesn't feel available to you, you'll scaffold out even further. May one day I trust I am worthy, or may I consider the possibility I am worthy. So you see how we're kind of moving to meet ourselves where we are and invite that possibility and everybody just taking a big breath if you're in contact with this right now, because worthiness is everything. The more worthy we feel, the more we're able to show up in our life and become the being that we would like to show up as.
Mhm. Wow, that is so, so interesting. And on the flip side, mindfulness, you mentioned about being aware. It's about living in the moment. But critics argue that too much focus in the present, it can lead to um, neglecting or just sidelining long-term planning and goals. So how do you balance being mindful while also staying future oriented?
Hmm. I like that question. That's interesting. It harkens to that incredibly consistent spiritual inquiry, which is, how do I find balance? Right? We're just talking about balance. And so in many ways, I would approach it how I would approach anything with balance. We wanna we wanna sort of feel into the present moment as a guide, and yet I think metaphor would be the best way to support this inquiry. I think of birds, you know, birds will land on a branch and they'll build their nest, and their songs come directly from the present moment. They're not following any rules, right? Like that you're supposed to have a catchy chorus. They don't follow those rules, right? So they're so present, of course, and yet they're very aware in their bodies that winter is coming,
Absolutely correct.
and that they might want to begin strengthening their wings. But there's this balance. They're still in their life, and yet there's perspective around what is ahead. And then, taking the metaphor even further, what if we fly up above the trees? They not only can see their current life, this beautiful little nest with their cute eggs, but they can also see the landscape and the river. Oh, we've been drinking from this river. I didn't realize the river took a bend up there. And oh, we've been in this little valley. I didn't realize there was a huge hillside up there. And so it's this kind of movement between being right here and also having a wide lens for the path that you're creating. But there's a beautiful teaching, Antonio Machado's poem. I don't have it in front of me. I didn't know this question was coming, but it comes to mind, so I'll say it. But the path is not defined. We create the path in walking. So it's this both and, right? We're both right here. We don't necessarily know exactly where we're going, but we know winter's coming. And we know we must ready ourselves. And so that's how I like to think about that balance. And that requires, I think of me as a business owner, that requires some Excel document and looking out at the year ahead and determining, what I need in order to make a living, right? And so,
Working backwards. Working back.
yeah,
Output. You're working backwards, but then according to the current circumstances or challenges or anything, you are flexible to make some changes, but you know the bigger picture, the bigger output.
yes. And you're not, when you're living mindfully, I'm curious if you've noticed this, is that you don't have as many interfering thoughts and regrets and heavy weight, or the resistance we talked about. My shoulders are so much more relaxed, so I can effectively plan from a place of presence rather than that interference actually paradoxically preventing me from moving towards the future from an ungrounded place, right? And one of my favorite mantras to speak a bit to this, because you can imagine people come to therapy and are like, all right, when's this going to be over? When am I going to get there? I'm looking to get there. And so one of the mantras I've created is, or co-created, because we're all in relationship with our people around us, is I am here now and I am on my way. I am here now. I usually pair it with the breath. Inhaling, I am here now. Exhaling, I am on my way.
Beautiful, beautiful. That is so, so ethereal. Ellen. Also, mm, many people confuse self compassion with being passive or complacent, or maybe some people would associate it with like selfish. How do you address this misconception in your teaching?
Yes, I had that myself. uh, Especially the athlete in me was like, whoa, no, you will get up and do this. So yeah, there's a big fear of being lazy, or so I'll just start with the science for anybody who enjoys that. It is very clear that that is inaccurate. The data, time and time again, shows us that to be gentle and kind with yourself fosters motivation and promotes the actions and the goals that you set forth for yourself. So this sort of harkens back to what we just mentioned about the shoulders being soft and the mind being a little bit more easeful with less interference. That alone allows you to have more literal energy. Like I have literally more energy for the things that I care about. Then I'd say so that's statistically speaking, you're going to do the thing. And then what's really powerful that I'm continually discovering is I'm creating a life I could have never planned if I hadn't deeply, deeply come into contact with self-compassion. Because in the practice of self-compassion, you discover who you are and what you want. To some extent, that's a living organism, so I'm still discovering that. But I've learned how to kindly listen, to what I want. And so therefore, there is a congruence with the goals I'm setting and my desires and my gifts. And so in that congruence, motivation is much more available.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So,
Have you noticed that? Have you by chance noticed that? That like through the practice of mindfulness and self-compassion, you are more easily creating the life that reflects your values and who you are.
course, of course. And I think I didn't realize it initially, but I sort of had a very busy, that hustling background. 10 years working, and I don't know how things worked out, but when I entered into the world of podcasting, somehow it has helped me to. It's kind of has been therapeutic for me, to talk about things which I haven't been taught in my childhood, or to kind of have realization that yes, addressing or having some compassion for yourself, or being kind, not being very judgmental about your mistakes or your past trauma. I think that's for my own betterment, and maybe for others as well who are my near and dear ones. So definitely, I mean, not a complete realization, but yes, in a bits, in part.
Yes, you're here now and you're on your way.
Exactly. And that's why I so much resonate with that line, as you mentioned. When you mentioned that, I kind of had an epiphany or a kind of realization that yes, maybe I don't know what I'll do after 2 years or 3 years. But I do have a goal in my mind. But right now, here, I'm doing this thing, and I'll just keep doing it right now.
That's so beautiful. And that requires a sense of safety.
Yeah.
And self-compassion promotes safety. It releases the hormones and neurochemicals of safety. And so what a powerful tool that we can actually create a sense of safety in our body. I do want to say that this can often require a lot of professional support, because you made the beautiful point that we're not taught this in childhood. And then if you layer on top any kind of trauma, then we actually don't have the neurological capacity for self-compassion on our own. We have to have it mirrored to us and or reflected back to us. Think of it like water. We have to drink the waters of self-compassion from another before we can have it coursing through us. And so that relational piece is really important. But that said, when this is being cultivated, yeah, there is this growing sense of internal safety that you have, that you can trust, that I don't know where I'm going, and you can surrender to uncertainty. Because those birds did not know where they were going. They weren't like, I am definitely going to be on the east coast of Mexico, about midway down, like we're northern Washington up near Canada. They don't know exactly where they're going. Maybe the monarch butterflies do, because that's absolutely incredible. But they don't maybe know where they're going. But they have this inner sense of listening and trusting, and that only can be created in a container that's safe to listen without judgment.
Of course. Lovely, lovely, Ellen. And before we wrap up, so if someone is listening today and they are feeling overwhelmed by the idea of self acceptance or mindfulness, what's one small actionable step they can take right now to begin this journey?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing, if any of those mantras or internal dialogues resonate with you, I would set an alarm on your phone, and for multiple times a day, maybe many, and say those to yourselves. The quickest tool to settling your nervous system that I've discovered is the long, slow exhale. So just take one big breath in, a long, slow exhale, pouring the air out of you, sort of like water into the earth or into a river. Pour it out. And then let your breath return to its normal rate and rhythm. And while you're doing those long, slow exhales, try those mantras and find where you land. Scaffold it out. May I trust I am worthy, or may I trust I am enough, just as I am. And just try them on. If that makes your shoulders cringe, move a little further away. Maybe one day I will. Even further away might be to start offering it to your pet. So saying to your pet, you are worthy just as you are. And that's just like 1 degree of separation. So we're increasing. So that's one very, very tangible skill to apply. And then nature is your mirror. There really is nothing wrong with you. Truly, there's nothing wrong with me. We are such sophisticated, adaptable beings. We've forgotten that we're animals and that nature can be our greatest teacher. So look at the trees. You don't look at a tree and think, dear good, why did you bend that way? My God, what were you thinking? No, we're maybe interested. We're like, whoa, why is it bending that way? Well, it's always bending towards the sun. We are always doing our best, even if we're contorted, to kind of find security and love, and maybe not in the wisest of ways. But that doesn't mean we judge that. So nature is your mirror. And I hope that those two things serve you and serve a sense of security and love in your body. because we need you. I mean, we need each other. We need you to love yourself. We need me to love myself. So, yeah, thank you so much. And if you want to practice with me, I would love that. I have a monthly class, Sana, that is an annual fee. It's only $75, and I do a 30-minute guided compassion practice. And, it resonated to join your podcast because my community is called This Mindful Life.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course, if our listeners would want to connect with you and reach out to you, how they can do that.
Yeah. So on my website, ellenslater.com, in the top right corner is a button called This Mindful Life. And that is this extremely wonderful community that I have created online. And we have a small little mindfulness class once a month, 30 minutes. And we move with the seasons of Earth. Each month has an interconnection with Earth and a little teaching and then a guided practice. Everybody's muted, video's optional. You could be washing dishes with your earbuds on. But it is really rooting to come into contact with these truths live with people. Um, and that's just a really, really wonderful option. I would love to have you in my community.
Lovely, lovely. And then I'll have all the details mentioned in the show notes for our listeners to connect with you and, of course, try it out. I think it's really very inspiring. And I think what a heart opening conversation we had today. And I really loved how you reminded us that self compassion, self acceptance, they're not just trends or some fluffy new ideas. I think they are transformative tools backed by science, data, and ancient wisdom, and of course, lived experiences. So, thank you so much for this conversation.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. Thank you for creating the space for open hearts. Yeah.
Hey, so listeners of today's episode, today's conversation has sparked something in you. Make sure to reach out to Ellen or check out her programs, her classes, her retreats, her online mindfulness courses. We can refer to the show notes along with this episode. And don't forget that change begins with a little kindness toward yourself. Start small, give yourself that grace, and remember that every step forward, no matter how tiny it is, matters. And thank you to all of you for tuning into the Mindful Living podcast. And I'm your host, Sana, as always, reminding you to take a deep breath, live mindfully, and love yourself fully. Thank you so much.